Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the second part of learning Python, which is, in my personal opinion, the best coding language out there. You won't ever need any others. I'm just kidding. You probably want to learn a lot of coding languages, but Python is one of the best to learn and one of the most used when you're looking for job applications. So today we'll be covering for loops, while loops, and if statements. If my spider wants to get its act together, yeah, okay. We'll be covering for while and if statements. So first, I think it would be best to start with if, and we'll do general print, stuff that I've already taught. So and variables. Let's assign a variable. That'll be the first thing that we review. So if you don't remember, to assign a variable, you create a variable name, and then you put the equal sign, and then you set it equal to some data type. You can set equal to a number. And so for the if statement, you might want to write if variable less than 20, then fulfill some kind of condition. And so if it's less than 20, let's say you want to print variable, you print out the variable, and this is, if statements of Python are very simple. Like, I'm not sure how else I want to ramble about it, but you have a condition, and then once that condition is fulfilled, you play out the next line of code. And so if we go to print, it'll print out 15 because variable is less than 20. And if you go over here and you write greater than 20, then it won't print. And speaking of less than and greater than, for if statements, while statements, for statements, in comparison statements, you want to do this is less than, this is less than or equal to, this is greater than or equal to, and this is not equal to. So if you want to have something not equal to another thing, you write exclamation mark equal sign. So if we print it out, it prints it out because variable is not 20, it's 15. But if we change variable to be 20, then it won't print it out. And that's an if statement. But of course, there's also else statements, which are just, if it doesn't fulfill that condition, then for everything else, print it didn't fulfill the condition. So if it doesn't satisfy the first if statement, else will always run. So usually for an if statement, if this passes, it prints this, it cuts the if statement off. But if this doesn't pass, it goes to the else, and then it prints what's in the else, or it just fulfills whatever conditions you have in the else. And because I have in the else, print it didn't fulfill the condition, you'll see it didn't fulfill the condition because it is equal to 20 when it should not be equal to 20. And then there's else if. And else if is essentially creating a second. If variable is less than 20, also print out variable. So for this specific instance, let's make variable 19, and we'll go to the print statement. It'll print out 19 because it passes this condition. I guess it would be better to demonstrate it by doing like this. Variable plus equal to 1. And for anyone who doesn't understand what this means, variable plus equal to 1 is basically you adding the value of 1 to whatever the value of variable is, because variable is an integer, so you can add another integer to it. It's basically the same as saying variable is equal to variable plus 1, and this is just a shortcut. So you write variable plus equal to 1, and just so we know which condition it's fulfilling, I added that. And so it'll print out 20 because it is less than 20. So it adds 1 and then prints out the variable. If variable is 20 exactly, it'll go all the way to the else statement. It'll say it didn't fulfill the condition. And if variable is greater than 20, it'll print 22, which is just what the variable is. So that should be about it for if statements. So now we'll be covering for loops, and for loops are used for the purpose of iteration and covering a task a certain amount of times. The most used case for a for loop is in regard to a list, but that is something that I'll talk about in another video. For now, we'll just set it equal to a certain number. So you want to start the for loop by saying for, and then typically you want to create a new variable in this statement, and that, well, you will always be creating a new variable in the statement, and so you want to say for x in the range of, let's say, 7. And what this is essentially saying is for x this amount of times, x will repeat the task that is in the for loop 7 different times. And because this is Python, due to the nature of Python, x essentially starts from 0. So what we'll see is x equal to 0, x equal to 1, x equal to 2, so on and so forth, all the way down to x equal to 6. And that's because that's 7 iterations, because x starts from 0 in Python. So whenever you run it like this in a certain range, remember, it does not start at 1. X will start at 0, and it'll repeat that 7 times. So typically the last number you'll see is the number below this. And if we just want to write print x, which is the condition that needs to be fulfilled, and then the action that will be done, we'll have, as seen, 0 up to 6. So in the first statement, as you see, x is equal to 0, and then it prints it, and it keeps going all the way up to 6. It iterates 7 times. This is 7 times the loop repeats and prints it in lines. And for loops can be very good for repeating a task or iterating through a list of items. And I know I said I'll talk about lists more, but if I just want to briefly cover one of the important uses of for loops, if you have a certain amount of items, set of items, it could be like, let's say you have a basket of fruits, and in the fruits is apples, bananas, grapes, etc. The for loop can go over the list, and you can write code to have it count how many items for each fruit is in the basket. So it might be 2 apples, 3 bananas, 4 grapes. And that's one of the very important uses of for loops. They're very good for iteration and for completing tasks that need to be done multiple times. The subject we'll be covering in this video is going to be while loops. And while loops are personally my favorite, but you need to be very careful with while loops. Because what while loops is, they'll enable you to set perpetually running, basically, engines. And so let's say you want to make a network. This is more of network and programming, but let's say you want to create a network, like you want to set up a server and you want that server to connect to many other clients being like users. So if you have your server, you want to run a while loop because you want the code to run all the time, because if the server shut down, you can't access it. So while loops are good for running infinite loops. And the example I'll give is, you have a variable, my variable, set it equal to 27. And let's say while my variable is less than or equal to 30, print my variable. What this will do is it'll print my variable as long as it's less than 30. And this will do this forever, which can be very dangerous because you'll take up all of the memory of your computer and it'll be very taxing and you'll crash and etc., etc. So what you want to do instead is you want to add some kind of condition to it, or some kind of recurrence, so it doesn't run forever. So in this instance, let's say my variable plus equal to 1. And what this will do is it'll add 1 to my variable so that it goes up to 30 and it stops. So you won't have an infinite while loop. And as you can see, it adds it goes up to 30, stops. Of course, in some scenarios, maybe you're, like I said, you're running a network server and you just want it to run forever. You just want it to keep going. You want it to run forever. There are better ways of doing it than this. This is very inefficient. This will take memory. This will drain your computer. This will cause your computer to crash. So, in most cases, don't do this. It'll literally run forever. So while statements, very useful. They're very good, but you have to be careful of using them. Otherwise, you run a risk of using up all your memory, causing your computer crash, etc. But yeah. So today we covered while loops, we covered for loops, and we covered if statements. These are 3 very important things that you need when coding. And they'll cover a majority of stuff that you want to do in code, because there's a lot of things you have to do over and over again, and it's just simple to use loops. It's simple to set up statements and conditionals so that you complete something only after something has been fulfilled. That's it for this video, though. Thank you everyone for watching. That's all.
너를 없으리